The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Workers at Hyundai walk out in Korea. Meanwhile, Teamsters in a court battle with Dairy Farmers of America over a plant closing in Vermont. And today on the show, a member of the House Labor Caucus on expanding worker power in America. Welcome to the Monday, August 24th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. A pro-union politician. We have one on the show today. Mark Pocan is his name. Here's a website you want to go to. Pocan, that's P-O-C-A-N, pocan.house.gov. Mark has been a member of Congress since 2013. That's when he started. He was elected in 2012. And he is a member of the House Labor Caucus, which is almost 130 pro-union members of Congress. You know, there's a lot of people in Congress that do not like unions. Mark is not one of them. We're going to talk about a pro-worker path forward. In the halls of Congress, he and members of the Labor Caucus are working towards strengthening worker power, raising wages, benefits, and working conditions, and creating good jobs at home. Right now, you probably know this, the federal minimum wage has been frozen at $7.25 an hour since 2009 and has lost 30% of its purchasing power over the last 17 years, which, by the way, is the longest period without an increase since the minimum wage was established, going back to 1938. Okay? That's when FDR was in office. That's when the Fair Labor Standards Act was created. All these good things that happen for workers slowly being chipped away. Mark is trying to stop that, and he's going to talk about what they're doing in Congress, how they're trying to raise their voices, also making sure that workers get the good jobs that they deserve. So Mark Pocan, our featured guest right here. This is all part of Labor 132. We're taking a look at what happened in America since the creation of Labor Day, 1894. Labor 132 right here on America's Workforce. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. $38 billion of assets under advisement serving the needs of Taft-Hartley funds, corporations, public funds, endowments, foundations, as well as religious organizations. And here's a firm that's been around since 1928, the year before the market crashed. BoydWatterson.com. This past Friday, the Hyundai Motors branch of the Korean Metalworkers Union launched its first full-day strike in 10 years, an effort which culminated in a rally in Seoul, South Korea. Nearly 40,000 plant workers scheduled to work the morning and afternoon shifts organized consecutive walkouts, which left production lines idle for 16 hours straight. Though the full-day walkout is the first in a decade, it comes on the back of 104 hours worth of partial strikes initiated by the workers since the 6th of May. Now, the series of 2 to 6 hour partial strikes have already resulted in lost production of around 55,000 vehicles, estimated to exceed 2.3 trillion won. That comes out to $1.7 billion, according to industry estimates. Now, The union plans to build on Friday's strike action, having announced additional 4-hour partial strikes this week. Last Monday, the union ended its 40-day break from bargaining by participating in the 16th round of negotiations, but efforts once again stalled without an agreement in sight. Union leadership clarified that workers will not agree to a deal that does not meet demands regarding the extension of workers' retirement age from 60 to 65, bonus increases, and the reinstatement of dismissed workers. Meanwhile, a federal judge has lifted a temporary restraining order which kept Dairy Farmers of America, DFA, from closing its plant in St. Albans, Vermont. Teamsters Local 597, which represents approximately 80 plant employees, sought court intervention against the plant's closure, which the union said had a potential union-busting motive retaliation for a strike last year. The court made its decision despite the union's argument that the plant closure would cause irreparable harm to employees' health care. Though the decision authorized the company to remove hazardous materials from the plant, it prevented DFA from taking additional steps to further the sale of the building until after arbitration is complete. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders joined the workers in holding a press conference last Wednesday calling for the company to reopen that facility. DFA, again, Dairy Farmers of America, denied accusations of union busting, claiming that evidence supporting the accusation was fabricated and maintaining that the plant simply isn't profitable enough to justify keeping it running. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a member of the House Labor Caucus will be joining us right here on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulators50.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. AWF Union Podcast. Union-friendly members in the House of Representatives. I just love saying that. And joining us as our featured guest today is Mark Pocan. We had on the show, I would say a couple of years ago. Mark, a little background here, was sworn in as the U.S. rep for Wisconsin's 2nd Congressional District. That was back in 2013. And that follows 14 years in the Wisconsin State Assembly. Mark, welcome back to America's Workforce. And there's a lot I want to talk about, especially the Labor Caucus, which is so important that we get a worker-centric point of view in Washington politics. So darn important. But I have to ask you this. I've been following what's been going on in Wisconsin ever since Walker became governor back in 2010. And boy, talk about a roller coaster in politics. My God, I don't know how you or people there survived, because it was a very progressive state. I mean, William Proxmire was the senator in Wisconsin who replaced Joe McCarthy so many decades ago. My gosh, what a history of politics in Wisconsin. But how is Wisconsin today? Talk to me about it, Mark. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for having me. We are a purple state, right? So you're always going to have pretty close state elections. We've been a little more successful in spring elections on the Supreme Court when they're nonpartisan, but partisan elections are going to be purple, right? You're going to win by a point or two generally, and you're going to fight to win by that point or two. And, we've been proving that over and over and over again. We've got a big race this year. Tom Tiffany, a Republican congressman from northern Wisconsin, is running against David Crowley, a former state rep and the Milwaukee County executive. And we had a really tight primary between a state rep and Dave Crowley. But at the end of the day, it's interesting. We just had a tour. They went to, I think, 17 cities around the state. The ticket that's running for governor and all the other statewide constitutional offices, the best turnouts were in those rural parts of northern Wisconsin where Tom Tiffany, the Republican, represents in Congress. For the people who know him best, like him the least, we just need to make sure everyone gets to know him like his own constituents, and we should be in good shape.
That's interesting. We had a conversation recently with Debbie Dingle, and I know you work with her on the Labor Caucus, and she talked about the importance of talking to workers, going to union halls and hearing what the workers are saying. I can only assume you're doing the same thing over there in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think part of that's in our DNA. Regardless, I've been a 30-plus year member of IUPAT, that's the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, and very proud of that relationship with those folks. And, that's how we reach out to a lot of the voters we need to reach out to. And bluntly, the economic populist issues that we should be running on are often really tied to labor issues.
How did you connect with the unions, if you don't mind talking about that? Because you were a small business owner. Was small business and then union, or vice versa? What happened there?
No. Opened up a small business, made it union right away. And, I often was doing the work when I first opened up for a good decade or so until we, were at a point where I wasn't the one doing it. But I've always remained a member because, for many businesses, and this is especially true, there's a group called NECA, which is the electrical contractors, who have union members. And the smart part of this, whether it be electricians, painters, or any trade, is if you can have well-skilled workers, pay them a good wage, give them good benefits, they'll work for you longer, and you get the benefit of the training they often had in the apprenticeship programs, and they're going to stay with you and take that experience so that you can be more successful as a business person. So to me, smart businesses see this as a win-win, having union workers, paying them well, supporting their families, having them stay with longevity. It just continues to work hand in hand.
Well, Mark, let's elaborate on that. I want to talk about worker power and especially collective bargaining. Unions have been under attack, well, for a long time. There's no question about that. That being said, there's more organizing going on right now. In fact, union membership ticked up last year and is continuing to go in that direction. What do you say to that? I mean, as far as this, is this pretty much a pushback on what's going on the conservative side?
Well, you're seeing people, I think, when there's a growing disparity between those trying to get by and the wealthiest, and there's a huge disparity. Elon Musk just became maybe the first trillionaire. That you're seeing the union movement that fights for the middle class and those aspiring to be in the middle class as the best vehicle to do that. So I think there's just a natural progression to look at unions and to, want to, have a say in your workplace, have a say in your pay and benefits, have a say in your safety conditions. So if you go to work in the morning, you're going to be expected to get home at supper and not have to worry about having an accident on the on the workplace. And, that's what people are looking at. So we're at some of the highest levels of public favorability for trade unions for that very reason, and especially among younger workers and in more fields. Starbucks, REIs, Amazon, a bunch of your employers that maybe you didn't have 20 years ago, we have now. We're finding ways to organize those folks as well. Because I think the classic, if I can, is Amazon. I remember I tweeted out a number of years ago that their delivery drivers and even some people in their warehouses had to urinate in bottles because they weren't given the time to take a break. And if Amazon came out and said, "You don't really believe that," on social media, they put a very high profile. And then a bunch of their employees showed the bottles of urine they have to have during the day. And within a week, they came and said, "Okay, my bad. You're right. We got to fix this." So, when people have working conditions like that, you look at a union as that gold standard that you want. And I just think, we've got a real strong public resurgence in wanting to have that say in your workplace.
A couple of those occupations you just mentioned are at or slightly above the minimum wage. And if you don't mind, I want to talk about that because the federal minimum wage has been frozen at $7.25 an hour since 2009. That's absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of states said, you know what, we have to do it upon ourselves to raise them. I don't know what the minimum wage there is in Wisconsin here, but the federal minimum wage, why is it not moving up? I don't understand that part.
It doesn't make any sense because, while many employers, most employers, the vast majority of employers pay more than that, not everyone does. And if it's just a little more than that, you're still living in poverty. You're actually on government programs in many states, then getting taxpayer subsidies for a bad employer. So it really makes sense to get us to a point where people aren't living in poverty, having to work 2 or 3 jobs. But also, don't forget, there's a sub minimum wage of like 213, I think it is, an hour for tipped workers, which is criminal, right? The fact that you have to follow the direction of your employer, yet you're only getting paid 213 an hour, and then counting on tips. That is a really old kind of carryover from, honestly, some old times where a lot of those folks were African American or people of color, and it was kind of part of the old racism that's out there. But we need to have a serious increase. There's a few proposals out there, and I think what's kind of scares people sometimes is they say, "Oh, it's going to increase their minimum wage to $25 or $28." I think is one of them right now. Well, but that's by 2038, and it just would take the current wage and increase it now a little bit to get to there. But we are way behind where we should have been if that had been linked to inflation. And I think having a law that actually recognizes those who get paid the least is really, really important and should be a priority for everyone because it's linked to affordability, right? Everyone's paying too much for groceries and everyday goods, healthcare, utilities, gas right now. But if you're also not making enough and you're paying more, man, that squeeze is really hard.
We're speaking with Mark Pocan, a representative out of Wisconsin, and he was elected to that position going back to 2013, following 14 years in the Wisconsin State Assembly. And he's also a member of the Labor Caucus. Now, this is all Democrats then? There's no Republicans in the Labor Caucus? And why is that?
Yeah, so we're, I think, about 128 members strong, and I think we're going to grow in the next Congress. The thing is, we do require you to actually support labor to join, and one of the requirements is the PRO Act, which is really a pretty small lift. But if people can't even support basic comprehensive worker protections and giving workers a voice through the basic elements of the PRO Act, well, then, we don't want to give people just a fig leaf to say they're pro labor and yet they don't vote pro-labor. So that, even though there's a couple Republicans that support the PRO Act, they haven't come to join, but the vast majority of Republicans don't even support that minimum measure.
Now, it's interesting because part of the PRO Act was voted on in the House. So I'm talking about the Faster Labor Contracts Act. And, Josh Hawley even supported it, which surprised a whole lot of people. What do you say to that? Are they starting to realize that maybe we should support workers? What do you think?
Well, I mean, think about it. It's such a small lift, right? It shouldn't even be a question unless you're just living by ideology than by your constituents. And unfortunately, these days, if Trump says jump, they all say how high, how fast, what direction, right? And they don't actually think of the people in their district first. They're thinking of, a broader ideology, in some ways, a cult following that they have. So the fact that even a handful maybe of Republicans or two have supported that is good, but it's not, nearly enough, because we want to make it so that if you have enough people who want to form a union, the law is clear, you should be able to form that union. But right now, there's a lot of barriers to it administratively as well. And I think the PRO Act really cleans up a lot of that to get to the intent of the law. And again, shouldn't be a heavy lift for Republicans, but, too many Republicans lean pro corporate owner or corporate, management, not pro worker.
America would look so different if unions had the opportunity to actually grow. And because, with union busting law firms around, and from what I've gathered, 50 million people, Mark, would join a union today if they didn't have so many roadblocks to unions. And the PRO Act would definitely pave the way. And that's exactly why it's not passing in the House of Representatives. Very sad. Mark Pocan, our featured guest on the show. Mark, I want to talk about energy projects, especially alternative energy projects. Can we get to that in the next segment here on the show? Okay, absolutely. Good. Our featured guest, Mark Pocan, out of Wisconsin. And here's the website you want to go to, the House of Representatives website. It's Pocan, P-O-C-A-N, pocan.house.gov. Back in a few minutes. You're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is presented by the Labor's International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. And I always appreciate a union-friendly guest here on America's Workforce. Mark Pocan, member of the House of Representatives since 2013. altogether, my gosh, almost 30 years in elected office. Also a member of the Painters and Allied Trades, led by Jimmy Williams Jr., who we featured on the show many, many times.
A great union leader, by the way. A
Oh,
great,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
and his dad was a good guy too. I mean, solid family there, solid family there. All right, I want to talk about these clean energy projects. And, this is funny too, because the current administration is hell-bent on fossil fuels drilling, especially in areas that were restricted, like national parks, places like that. But I want to get into what happened here with clean energy jobs, because from what I've been gathering, there's actually more jobs. They may not all be union jobs, but there's more jobs being created and are still being created when it comes to clean energy, solar, wind, things like that. What's the status in the state of Wisconsin, Mark?
Well, a lot of projects have been canceled due to the one big beautiful bill. A big part of that bill was getting rid of many of those renewable projects that create a lot of jobs. But, there's a reason Iowa, a Democrat could win the governorship, the U.S. Senate, 3 of the 4 House seats this cycle, between the tariffs that are making people pay more for groceries and everyday goods, and the ending of these projects, because, wind energy is huge in a state like Iowa. People are really feeling that squeeze. So, a lot more people could have good family supporting jobs, union jobs, if it wasn't for what the Republicans did with the one big beautiful bill.
Well, how bad is it? I mean, can you speak to what's going on in the state? You mentioned Iowa. Well, what about in Wisconsin right now? I mean, are these kind of like just dead for a while until maybe a change in the administration? What do you know about that?
Well, I think you got to start the program again. We would have to start from scratch. It's not like you can just turn the lever back on, because they got rid of it, I believe, in statute. So, that's the real problem right now. We need to, change the House and the Senate. We're going to have to, in 2 years, change the White House, but it may take that to bring some programs back on.
What about gerrymandered districts? Are you has that been the case in the state of Wisconsin? I know it's happened in the state of Ohio. I mean, we saw what happened in Texas. California decided to do their own version. What's the status in Wisconsin?
Well, in Wisconsin, we actually are a gerrymandered state. Remember I said a perfectly purple state, but we only have 2 out of the 8 congressional seats are Democratic. So because of that, there's been a case that's been brought to the Supreme Court twice that I think they kind of lazily sent back, and now they've now allowed it to proceed to a lower court. So I think we have the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, we've had some wasted time, but at a time states are gerrymandering their state and we would like to unrig ourselves. That's where we need to do. It had fairer maps for our state legislature, but that was separate from Congress. So now, we have a chance this cycle to pick up the state assembly and state senate, 5 seats in the assembly, 2 in the state senate. But we still can win a seat or 2 in Congress, but we don't have fair maps to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and the money in politics is absolutely ridiculous today. It's so sad, because that has changed the dynamics. You mentioned how Elon Musk. Well, he tried to buy the state Supreme Court over there, and it didn't work out. It doesn't always work out. It helps in a lot of campaigns. Yeah. Getting back to the workers' point of view, it's so important. This is a 100% union show, and we try to get the people we try to get workers on the show, the business managers of the respected unions, especially the trade unions, the presidents of unions, and also the people in the halls of Congress that support unions, people like yourself. I'm just wondering, and I've seen this, I like to hear what you're saying. There's a guy in Nebraska, Dan Osborne. You might be following what he's doing. He's an independent. Yeah, he's a steam fitter, union guy. In fact, he led the Kellogg's boycott back in 2017. There's a lot of people that are saying, you know what, it's not working for me. I got to do something. I got to get involved. I don't know. Do you see that happening on the local level, especially people that are members of unions? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think you are seeing, more and more folks. I think that's a classic example of a race. There's a firefighter I know running up in Montana, and I believe also in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of working people that, we haven't had a lot of working people in Congress to begin with. And now we have some opportunities with the elections that actually will be pickup seats that would get us the majority. We would love to have more voices like that in Congress. It would certainly help.
And I'm going to throw one more thing at you here, Mark. I know you're a busy guy. Labor Day, right around the corner. What we've been doing on the show here, we started this a couple of years ago to celebrate the anniversary of Labor Day when it was created, which was 1894. That's when then President Grover Cleveland signed the Labor Day legislation, creating it a national holiday. Your message to those listening to this podcast right now, Mark, what would it be, especially going into this Labor Day?
Well, I think the message is, it's the labor movement that brought us the weekend, the 40-hour week, a lot of other things that people have come to expect and rely on right now, just in society in general. But we should celebrate that, because if we don't celebrate it, the things like that can go away when Elon Musk and people like Elon Musk put big money in elections or other efforts to try to make it harder for workers. So I think, it's a good time to celebrate, to be there with other people, and to really, for me, recognize these new industries. I mean, I'm some of the most excited I've been about organizing has been the Starbucks, the Amazons, the industries that we didn't expect it, that really are often paid much lower and treated much worse. The fact that they now are able to organize is a really big deal. And so, I think it's good to be there to enjoy not just a day off, but maybe to celebrate labor and what it's meant to you and your family and your friends and family and neighbors' families as well.
Representative Mark Pocan out of Wisconsin. Pocan.house.gov is a website. You want to check him out. Check out his background, see the legislation that he's sponsoring. Mark, you are always welcome here on America's Workforce. If there's any legislation that needs a little nudge, a discussion here on how it's going to benefit the worker, you make sure you connect with us, okay?
Oh, absolutely. And again, we have a good 128 member strong caucus, some great vice chairs that are experts in certain areas as well. We're going to have trade coming up. So, not just the co-chairs, but a lot of our members would love to be on and share with your listeners some of the activities that Washington's taking on right now.
Well, we appreciate that. Stay in touch and stay safe, okay, brother?
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, the Director of Education for the United Steelworkers. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.